Hello, and welcome to RuPaul's Drag Race Rejudged, where today I will be talking about what I believe are production's 6 biggest punching bags. This was one of the last videos I had planned before I went on a 9-month break, so I'm very happy to actually get to do it. Before I get into the actual list, first I think it is important to establish what actually is a production punching bag. When I say mistreated queen, the main people that are probably gonna come to mind are Max on Season 7, Sugarcane on Season 11, and then Shangela on All Stars 3. While there are definitely some strong arguments for why all 3 of these queens were mistreated, it usually boils down to a specific episode. Prior to their eliminations, I think it's pretty fair to say that all 3 of these queens were judged more or less fairly. A punching bag is a queen that production mistreats continuously throughout the season, but never actually wants to get rid of. Most of these queens are randomly thrown into the low placement to fill out the bottom 3, put in the bottom to guarantee the elimination of someone else, and then disposed of when production has no more use to them. In this video, I will be explaining how they were a punching bag, and also coming up with my best guess as to why they were singled out by production to get mistreated. The first queen that I think fits the role of a production punching bag is Morphine. And if I'm remembering correctly, Morphine's treatment all season is what originally inspired this video. The first instance of Morphine getting thrown under the bus can kind of be explained away by personal taste, but I don't think she should have been in the bottom for the Rusical. Maya and Megami were a pretty clear bottom 2 this week, but I think Morphine was all around solid in this episode, and since Plain Jane massively outshined Tsunami in their shared role, I think it's at least somewhat fair to say that Tsunami probably should have been in the low spot over her even when you factor in runways. The next blow to Morphine's track record is Snatch Game, and outside of the underdeveloped friendship between Tsunami and Morphine, I have no idea how she was in the bottom here. I think her runway was fine, Dawn was weaker in the challenge, and they were even on the runway, and Nymphia, while stronger on the runway, was way weaker in the challenge. I will also take the time here to say that the subreddit generally agrees with this. In the bottom 2 poll for this challenge, 87% of people picked Tsunami, 39% picked Dawn, 38% picked Nymphia, and only 26% picked Morphine. Going 1 episode forward, I think the strongest evidence for Morphine being a production punching bag was randomly throwing her in the bottom 3 for the Goth Design Challenge. This challenge clearly should have been a top 4 bottom 2 episode, but even if it wasn't, I would say that Plain Jane probably should have been in the low spot over Morphine, based off both garment design and adherence to the theme. Next up is the Improv Challenge, where the rules were randomly changed to get a Miami Girls bottom 2. This was very much a collaborative challenge that should have been judged in teams, and regardless of who should have won, Dawn and Maya were the worst team overall. Maya was the worst individually, then Dawn, then Morphine, but even then, Dawn's runway was not strong enough this week to justify judging the queens individually just to save her. While it did probably help Morphine's career long term that she lip-synced against Maya here, from a fairness perspective, I think she should have been low, if not safe, alongside her team. Then finally, for the makeover challenge, I'll try and keep things brief here. The margin of victory in a lip-sync should matter. Someone like Q with a good track record can stay over someone with a bad track record who narrowly beats them like Amanda, while someone like Plasma with a good track record can still lose to someone who absolutely steamrolls them like Maya. While that line of thinking justifies Sapphira staying, I don't think that's why Morphine went home. I think the main reason Morphine went home was not because of Sapphira's track record, but because with Dawn gone, Morphine was the only person left who was expendable to production. All of this brings us to a final question of why was Morphine a punching bag? I think lip sync skills. Morphine is one of, if not the strongest performers on the cast, and if you've already been pigeonholed into being the lip sync assassin of the season, what's one more low placement when production can protect the track record of a favorite like Plain Jane? The next queen that I would categorize as a production punching bag is my GOAT, Deja Sky on Season 14. I've already done a video on the mistreatment of Deja, but it never hurts to go over it again because my god was Deja mistreated. The first instance of her being a punching bag is the talent show. I'm not gonna argue that Deja's talent show was amazing, but she was unfairly thrown under the bus here by production. Production decided to have fake out eliminations in the first 2 talent show episodes of the season, and while Deja was definitely bottom 2 worthy in this performance, there just shouldn't have been a bottom 2 to begin with. June, Orion, Daya, and Deja all should have been low, and while I don't think production was singling Deja out yet, episode 2 sets the tone for her mistreatment all season. The next hit against Deja, and where I think she specifically becomes a production punching bag, is in the Glamazon Prime Design Challenge. I'm gonna put the looks up on the screen right now, but Deja clearly should not have been low here. She had a really good concept and was above at least Georges, Jasmine, Maddie, and Carrie. The next instance of this is going to be the DragCon Hosting Challenge, where Deja was best in both the challenge and the runway. This was the perfect episode to give her the win, but production once again makes the decision to bump her down a placement to keep Bosco in contention for the crown. After that is the Rusical, where Deja was a solid 3rd or 4th place, but instead of giving her her flowers, or at least putting her as safe, she was thrown in the bottom to protect queens that were more valuable to the narrative production was making for the season, like Angeria. The final push of mistreatment here was the roast. Deja was the only queen in the bottom 3 to deliver an actually funny joke, and still ended up in the bottom, partially because production backed themselves into a corner, and partially because Daya, Deja, and Georges were the only queens left that production viewed as expendable, and production only wanted to let one of them into the final 5. I think all of this combines to create a pretty clear picture that Deja was continuously bumped down a placement, because for production, it is easier to pick a few queens to pile these low and bottom placements onto to make their picks for the finalists look better. I hope I've done a pretty good job of establishing her as a punching bag, but let's ask why. Obviously, I am not part of production, but that would be really funny. I think the main reason Deja got pushed into this role was that she took the longest to get momentum. In the early part of the season, Deja had a few good moments, but was really starting to gain serious momentum after Daytona wins, but at that point, it was 7 episodes into the season, and production had already decided on a final 4 of Angeria, Bosco, Camden, and Willow. I will end out this segment by saying that if things were judged fairly, Deja has a clear shot at the final 5, if not the finale. Moving on to the All-Stars franchise, I think production punching bags are much more common here. The first 2 queens I'm going to talk about very briefly are Aja on All-Stars 3 and Mo Hart on All-Stars 4. Both of these queens already have specific videos made about them by a certain creator, so I'm going to keep this section brief. On All-Stars 3, there should not have been a bottom 3 for the All-Stars 3 Improv Challenge, or Snatch Game for that matter. Both challenges had a clear bottom 2 and then a 3rd worst with a great runway. Also, Aja got screwed over in the ball, but I can't really say anything here that hasn't already been said before. Then on All-Stars 4 for Mo, I think she should have been safe, low at worst in the Girl Groups Challenge, high in the roast, and depending on how you weigh finale performances versus track records, top 2 for the season with either Monet or Trinity. Both of these queens clearly fit the bill for a production punching bag, and for a reason. I think they both did a lot better than production expected, and I'm gonna leave it at that. Next up on All-Star 6, we have Akiraia Davenport, and I don't know what she did, but Akiraia must have made someone in production really mad at her. The first evidence of this was in the episode 2 ball, where Akiraia placed low. Looking at the subreddit poll for the bottom 2, in first place is Jiggly Caliente with 92% of the vote, second is Silky Nutmeg Ganache with 34%, then Trinity K. Bonet with 23%, Yara Sophia with 20%, then Ginger Minge at 11%, and then finally Akiraia Davenport at 9%. Despite production putting her in the bottom and putting a ton of focus on how allegedly bad her looks were, the fan base voted her as being 7th best out of 12, and somehow she still ended up low. That is not based in reality. A low placement in the ball is one thing, but putting her in the bottom for the Rusical is one of the most egregious decisions production has ever made, and I wish people talked about it more. Her performance as Prince was really good, her runway was absolutely incredible, and there were clear worse competitors. Once again, looking at the bottom 2 poll for the subreddit, Ginger is first at 66%, then Yara at 57%, then Eureka at 50%, and then in 4th place is Akiraia at 15%. There is no universe in which Akiraia should have been in the bottom over these queens, and it is ridiculous that she was. If the cast hadn't intervened to save her here, there would have been a lot more backlash to production. Just to summarize though, in a stretch of 4 episodes, Akiraia should have had 3 safes and a bottom, and instead she ended up with a safe, a low, and and 2 bottoms, which is especially bad when the cast is judging based on track records. Those were all of the main points on why Akiraia was a production punching bag, but just on a personal note, Akiraia was my personal winner pick on the Pink Table Talk Challenge. That said, she was high, and most people ranked Eureka and Trinity K. Bonet above her, so I know that this is just my bias. Regardless of that, Akiraia had a seriously deflated track record, deserved a lot better on the season and in the edit, and I can't really blame her for choosing to withdraw from the Lollapalooza. She was a huge presence in the edit on season 11, so unless someone in production was mad at her, there's really no justification for how she was treated. Moving on to All-Stars 8, we have Kahana Montrese, and she was amazing in the All-Stars 8 ball. Once again, I'm going to be citing the subreddit poll. Heidi was voted into the top with 88%, then Jessica at 71%, and Kahana at 60%, meaning that the fanbase viewed her as more deserving of being in the top than every single high queen. Instead of giving Kahana the praise she deserved, the top 4 was Jessica, Jimbo, Kandi, and Lala. Jessica deserved it, and you could make an argument for Jimbo, but Kandi and Lala being in the top over Kahana was absolutely ridiculous, especially in an episode where 45% of viewers believe that Lala Ree should have been in the bottom 2. The next 2 instances of Kahana getting thrown under the bus were back-to-back in the Rusical and Improv Challenge. In the Rusical, Kahana was good overall and roughly even with Jessica, if not a little ahead when you factor in runways, but outside of that, she was clearly ahead of both Jimbo and James. Then in the Improv Challenge, Kahana, Kandi, and Alexis were all pretty bad, but Kahana was clearly ahead of them, landing 1 joke compared to 0. In the Rusical, production just wanted to protect Jimbo, and then in the Improv Challenge, they wanted to protect Kandi, but why was Kahana specifically targeted? From production's perspective, she overstayed her welcome. On almost every season of All-Stars, production casts someone who knocks it out of the park with a surprise glow-up. Production panics because it doesn't fit into their plan for the season, and then has to get rid of them in some unfair way. It happened with Tatiana on All-Stars 2, then Aja, then Mo, and then Kahana is just yet another victim in that cycle. The final queen that I would qualify as a production punching bag is Cheryl on UK Season 1. As iconic as Cheryl talking about getting ready for another week of doing mediocre is, she probably wouldn't have said or thought that if she hadn't been mistreated all season. In the episode 1 runway challenge, her Queen Elizabeth look was not great, but a lot of people had really weak looks in that category. Then for her hometown look, she had the 3rd best look in that category, and that is not just my bias, the poll agreed with me. While she was technically voted into the low placement that week, Bag of Chips was absolutely worse than her. Then in the episode 3 design challenge, once again her look was not great, but a lot of people had really weak performances and she was once again thrown into the low placement, so production could avoid drawing attention to Bagga's terrible runways. Even with all of that said, I think I could explain away a lot of that, but her makeover is probably the nail in the coffin of her being a production punching bag. This is an incredibly cold take, but she was the best and deserved to win, and if I'm being honest, from a storyline perspective, her coming out of nowhere and forcing Viv or likely Davina to fight for their lives a week before the finale could have made the season much more compelling. The fact that they chose to throw her under the bus to save Bagga on 3 separate occasions solidifies her as a production punching bag. As for why, RuPaul in production knew of Vivian before the season and loved her. Davina did really well early on and solidified her slot in the finale after a fight with Vivian, and then to Ru, and I mean absolutely no offense here, Bagga's drag is the equivalent of jingling keys in front of a child. Unfortunately for Cheryl, she just didn't fit into that narrative, and production ended up throwing her under the bus. Do you want non-Emmy nominated gay shit? Well then you should check out the RuPaul's Drag Race Rejudged YouTube channel and hit subscribe.